Well, Paulina, thank you so much for reaching out and for joining me. I'm super excited. You're obviously my first guest from Poland, and I'm going to pepper you with questions about your perspective and the Slavic perspective. But before we do that, I want to hear about your own diagnosis journey. How old were you when you were first diagnosed with ADHD, and kind of what was happening in your own life that really led you to start connecting the dots and thinking I should look into this?
Well, a meme.
A meme.
So basically, like every millennial in this world, I just self-diagnosed through a meme. I found a meme from ADHD Alien. It's usually she's drawing comic books, comic strips in two side panels, and she was just describing the difference between how it looks like and what it is. So something that looks like procrastination for ADHDers is decision paralysis. For something that looks like being very chaotic, for us it's being just very interested and very passionate about something. So I just, the whole panel just spoke to me, and I immediately thought, well, yeah, that's the answer. And that was winter of 2019. I was 32. I was pregnant with my second child, and I kind of froze when I realized what this means. And then I went to my husband and I said, I think I have ADHD, and I started crying. And he was amazing. He just asked me very gently if I'm just sad about how it could have been, what my life could have been, and I said yes. So it was a very sweet moment. And then I in the evening I went to my chosen family, my chosen parents, because I was vacationing at their house, and they're both psychologists. And I asked them, do they think that diagnosis process makes any sense when I'm pregnant? Like if, pregnancy brain, some kind of, is pregnancy brain, not a good moment to diagnose, to take a diagnosis process. And they were asking, what do you think you have? And I said, I think I have ADHD. And I said, no, you don't have it. You have everything else, but you don't have that. So, that was a shot in the face, let's say. So I just decided not to talk about this to them. But from the moment I saw this meme, I was sure. I didn't need anything else, and every other step I was taking on my way, I was just learning more about something I was already sure about. This one piece of information was enough. I obviously went through a moment or many moments of feeling like maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm making this up. So the famous, and I'm losing my word. What is it? When I'm doubting my diagnosis is
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so famous imposter syndrome. I went through that, and I went for a consultation, psychiatric consultation, I think maybe 3 months after. And the lady said, yeah, you do have ADHD, but I will not give you meds because you're pregnant, and that affects the baby, that affects lactation. You cannot take meds while you're pregnant or when you are breastfeeding. And now I know that was not true. So, now I know I could have taken it, but I don't think I would have, because I just knew there is so many things happening with me that adding another factor that might change everything, even if it's the change for a better, I just kind of want to hold on to things I know. So I wouldn't have taken it anyway. So that was fine. Plus, that was 2019, and I had my child at the beginning of famous 2020, and hence the pandemic and being closed off in our homes. So that was the last thing on my mind, taking meds and taking care of my mental health when the world is falling apart. But I revisited the idea after the pandemic was, well, maybe not over, but heading towards better phase, not the phase where nobody knows anything, but just we kind of go towards finding a cure.
Right.
And that coincided with me going back to school, because I do not have a master's degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree. And in my bubble, in my, let's say, social group, that's unheard of. You're either lazy or stupid if you don't have at least a bachelor's degree. Just a high school diploma, that's nothing. So I was very much hesitant towards the idea of going back to school for the third time, because that would be my third try, and it still is, because I'm still in school. Fingers crossed. I will. That will be the last one. But I was discussing it with my husband, and I was thinking, this thing in the back of my head that is, turning into my hyper focus and my hobby and my whole life, just reading on ADHD. Maybe this is the good time to look into meds as a means to help me focus and just, go through the horror of school again, because I have very, 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 maybe not traumatic, but bad experiences with school and academia and all of that.
Same. I would call it traumatic for sure.
Jesus, yeah. So basically, I went for an official diagnosis this time. I got meds and I started them, and so far so good. But I would say, it's not just the meds that keep me in school, but also, the therapeutic process, and also finding the community in many, many, many ways that this community is supporting me and my mental health, and just, me not going completely bananas with everything that's going on.
Yeah. It's interesting. I also have gone back to school, and a lot of it is because of the fact that I never thought I would go back and get my master's, because I barely graduated from the skin of my teeth, and I just always felt like I was wasn't smart enough for school, and had to deal with that stigma, that internalized stigma of the fact that I'm just not smart. And it's through this diagnosis that I've gotten the courage to go back, but also remembering how academia is a disaster. It's really difficult to navigate all of the administration, and there's so many things that I'm refusing this time around to just try to white knuckle it through like I did last time. I'm really trying to make sure I get accommodations. I'm in constant contact with the Disability Resource Center, and I'm really trying to look out for myself in that way. But at the same time, it's really hard. There's so much paperwork, and there's so much administrative bullshit that I'm why am I doing this? Academia is really unfriendly to me and my brain, and it's not a reflection of how smart I am or how not, but I'm really stubbornly, I'm like you, I'm fingers crossed, I just want to get through this, and be kinder to myself, right? I think that's the thing that's been different this time around.
And think about it, in America, you are kind of, a hub of avant-garde of people that know about ADHD, so many resources and so many research is done in America, and still, the academia is so much far behind what we know. So you can imagine what happens here. But I'm fortunate to have picked, and that was maybe not a coincidence, but kind of a coincidence that I picked a very disability-friendly school. So they do have the center for disability, and ADHD is miraculously a reason to be registered there. But so far, I just wrote them, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, nothing happened because of paperwork. Plus, I'm also a weekend student. That was the only way I was going to graduate, because I knew if one day you're going for 8 a.m. and another one is for 5 p.m. and another day is just 2 hours here, 2 hours there, I would die and could not work and could not raise my children. So weekend studies are my only option, and that goes with another kind of stigma, because there is a stigma that only the people that have the worst grades ever, but they still want to graduate from university, then they go to weekend school. So that's another load of stigma there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's been really difficult to really internalize that this is a disability. I think that's something that you kind of have to come to on your own, like to acknowledge that that you've been diagnosed with a disability and that you are entitled to help. And I think because we've spent so much of our lives, at least I have, thinking I'm just lazy, or what's wrong with me, I could just do it if I just sat down and figured it out. It's really difficult for me to embrace the disability in this way, even though I talk about it constantly and, I'm very open about it, I'm finding it really difficult to acknowledge that I am disabled, and therefore, because of this disability, I am worthy of help. That it's a right that I have, and I think that's something like a mental hurdle that I'm trying to get over, and I'm sort of surprised by.
When you think disabled person, you don't see yourself. Yeah. You kind of have to make that connection, but kind of push, the same magnets that are pushing against it, but you have to push them together and see that you really struggle. You actually do have more of an uphill battle to fight, but just knowing internally that you do have those moments and spurs of intelligence and energy and everything. You think, maybe I can summon it somehow, and just accepting that you can't, and that you might just need help, and maybe that's okay. That's an uphill battle in itself. But I don't even see ADHD as a disability. I mean, it is disabling in this world, but I'm more thinking that this civilization is just disabling our ways of living, our ways of thinking, and our ways of acting and achieving things. So I think, I put the disordered part on the world and civilization more than on myself.
Absolutely.
I also, through this project, this project of podcasting, but also through the community on Facebook, I met people that are completely 100% fine with their brains, and not as a rebellion. They're just fine. They're okay. They have self-worth and self-esteem, both of them. So it's possible. So, I think that it is possible to function in the world with ADHD and just not be struggling. But if you do, just definitely go get help. Go get anything that helps you, because we are worth it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, I remember going back to the emotional element of the diagnosis in the beginning. I remember my therapist saying to me, that you've been walking around with a brick tied to your ankle your whole life. And, in the beginning, it's just that realization over and over and over again, and all these different elements of my life, including school, realizing how that brick still follows me around. But it's true. There's the brick, like you said, is the disability is in relation to the environment. It's not like the brick is there all the time. The brick is only there when you're in certain situations that are completely unaccommodating to who you are and how you think. And so it is difficult to kind of think of this in terms of a constant disability, because I think you're right. We think of disabilities as being, irreversible or unmanageable. Not unmanageable, or like
inherently,
yes.
Something that gives you a disadvantage, and ADHD might give you disadvantage in an environment that just doesn't let you be ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I know it is so emotional. I'm getting really emotional right now. I don't know why. I think thinking
that might be me. I'm an open wound. Like, sorry, man.
But
no, I'm just, I get, you know what, when I'm interviewing people on my podcast, I'm crying like minimum 3 times during every conversation. Like, I was crying when I was listening to your podcast. Like, sometimes I had to stop the car and cry and then keep going. Then I was, sometimes people are talking to me and I'm just showing them to keep talking, but then I'm like crying really, really silently, so the mic doesn't get the sound. Like, Jesus Christ. No, I'm an open wound, man. Like, I don't know what's happening, but last few months was just, oh my God. Because the podcast is very new and, it's a budding project. Like, it's less than 2 months. And, the scope of emotions I'm experiencing, I'm starting to realize that maybe that's why I'm on verge of crying all the time, basically. So I might be, putting that on you a little bit.
Well, and I think it says, like you said, when you are going down these rabbit holes and you're feeling so deeply seen by ADHD literature, ADHD memes, whatever it is, like there is that feeling like I relate so deeply to this pain and this emotional element that, like, that in itself, that speaks for itself when it comes to questioning the diagnosis, right?
Yes,
realizing
this relief,
yes,
this just profound, deep relief, like to the core of your soul. Like, finally, I can, like, it's a tense muscle that for a second you can let go of. Obviously, you have to tense it up while you go back out there, but you can let go of it for just this 2 or 3 seconds and just, oh my God.
Yeah, but then also realizing, like, I didn't realize how much I was struggling until I started thinking about ADHD and all of the various ways in which it had affected me over the course of my life, and realizing, like you said, like, there's that grief, like looking back and thinking I could have had a different life, but also just like getting hit with that realization of how difficult my life had been, and I hadn't acknowledged how much I had been struggling until I was able to, kind of within the safety of this diagnosis. And oh my God, I cried so much when I was diagnosed, all the time, for that same reason of just like, God, my life was really hard. And I finally was able to acknowledge it, I think, in a way that was not filled with self-blame, right? That it wasn't filled with like, I brought this on myself, that maybe I wasn't the problem all along.
Yeah, because the grief comes in waves, and I just have, each wave is a different color, and I just deal with them as they go, and as they come and they go. Recently I saw another comic book that said that we are on the receiving end of undeserved privileges and undeserved traumas. So that kind of made me feel better, because I'm also very prone to feeling guilty, and it's very, very easy to make me feel guilty about something, or responsible for something that I might not be responsible for. So, I'm in a constant state of thinking, am I using my privileges to the best ability I can to, help those without those privileges. So that kind of made me feel better because, it was traumatic not to get, the recognition, the diagnosis, all the help that I could ever get. But I also got so many privileges on the other side that it kind of, for me, for this one moment in this particular wave of grief, it kind of helped me. Because I'm constantly thinking, how can I help people around me? And I think that kind of balances it out for me. Another wave of grief will be a different color, so I will have to figure something out then. But right now I'm, surfing this wave.
Now, you mentioned your surrogate parents. The psychologist said you have everything else but not ADHD. What did they mean by that?
I'm not sure. I think they meant anxiety because I'm very, very anxious person. I'm afraid of everything. I think of plan B and C and, D and X and Y and Z. So maybe they meant anxiety. That's the thing as well. I don't blame them anymore. Let's say I was kind of upset about this, but I'm not anymore. And I also talked about this with them that it was hurtful, and that's why I did not talk to them about this topic for a year after that. But we're cool now. It's just not their specialty, and they don't know. And the base level knowledge of ADHD is so low that I don't even have the expectations anymore of anyone knowing anything. I just, assume everybody knows nothing, and if anybody knows anything, I'm just glad I just treat this as a bonus. So, yeah.
I think that's smart. I definitely have that same sort of boundaries, or that, like self-protection, right? When it comes to talking about it and who I talk about it with, because it is so deeply disappointing to realize how misunderstood it is with so many people who I'm close to in my life, that I'm like, I think for the benefit of our relationship, we just need to never talk about this. And that realization, like, as much as I want people to understand what I'm going through, like, it's my journey, it's my personal journey. And, and I don't really need
and you are already
to convince
in the
anyone,
right?
Yeah.
You are already pushing the boundaries, and you're spreading the knowledge. So you're already doing this for, in small increments for so many people. So you don't have to, have those same battles at your house.
Yeah.
In your family reunion, right? You're doing enough, let's say. So being self-protective and I don't know, maybe a bit coy, or just leaving or ignoring the subject in some moments where you deserve peace. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I think if people ask me what I do, if people ask me what my podcast about, I'll just say something really uncomfortable, like feminine hygiene, and they'll stop asking.
Okay. I did not thought of that.
It's true. So wait, looking back over your childhood, so you were diagnosed in such flux, right? I mean, or even just this whole journey, like being pregnant, especially with number 2, I feel like, God, there's so much chaos in your life during all of that. And so much, talk about crying with no reason, or not understanding why, the emotional roller coaster. But looking back even over your childhood, or some of the like points in your life what do you look back at and think, the signs were clearly there all along, just nobody knew what to look for?
Everything. Jesus Christ, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Because my age is not silent. I definitely do have the age in ADHD, the hyperactivity. I was climbing trees. I was running up the halls with all the boys during school. During breaks, or sometimes during lessons. I was fighting them. They were hitting me. I was hitting them back. I definitely was very much on the move all the time. Also, during the lessons I enjoyed, like Polish literature, I was raising my hand, but in such an expressive way that I had to be put in the back. So I was in the back so I can talk to my friend, but when the question was asked, we were both raising our hands, but then also doing the dance, like doing everything. I think was she ADHD as well? She might have been. Anyway, so I was very, very engaged during those lessons that I liked, and absolutely out of it during the lessons I did not like. What else? Oh, forgetfulness. I'm having flashbacks from, losing permission slips and, the pamphlets with information about school trips. Oh my God, this is bad. So that homework, that's just like a battlefield. Homework was absolutely awful. Oh, my father was really trying, but he was trying in such a punitive way that I to this day I have this thing where I cannot work on the computer when somebody's behind me. I hate when somebody can look at what I'm doing because I immediately feel judged. I mean, I was not doing homework. He was like going in, going back, going in, going back, and checking if I'm doing homework. I was coming up with ways to read comic books, but make it look like I'm doing homework, and praying that this time he just peeks through the door and not goes up to me, because then he will see the comic book. And oh my God, the homework was just the death of me. Everything, but also being told that I am talented but lazy. Nobody had the language to understand why such an intelligent person would fail so badly at school. Nobody could understand this. They could only see that I'm reading comic books. So that. So what was I saying? Losing stuff? Yeah, that was there. We are just talking about childhood, right? Not the early adulthood.
No, I mean anything, really. It's like you go through your whole life through this new lens. I feel like high school, university,
failing
relationships, dating.
Geez, don't get me started. Failing studies twice. I was just telling myself that I am very passionate person that just has to be interested in what she's doing. So that's why I'm failing studies, because they include some interesting courses and some not interesting courses. Then I reframed it in I'm a very entrepreneurial person, so I just need to be in business, and actually a degree will be holding me back because it will just kill my natural creativity. The mental flip-flops that I'm going through to just, understand, because I know I'm intelligent. Everyone tells me so. I can see the signs. I can see, the proof that I'm not dumb. So it must be that I'm lazy. Just there are no other ways to understand it. But then I ended up being an immigrant in Canada and working so much. I was working like 12-hour shifts, physical jobs, like landscaping. And I was thinking, how can I be lazy? That's not possible. I'm waking up at 6 a.m. I'm working then 1 hour commuting to work, working 12 hours, door-to-door sales. That's a hard job. And if I manage to get a sale, then I have to work physically. And after that, an hour commuting back, going to sleep. It ended up being 18 hours because I was in a cult-like almost an MLM thing with landscaping. That was a disaster. It helped me a lot with, knowing how to speak to people and decoding different accents of English, because I was speaking in English in an accent, and we were ending up in different neighborhoods, so I had to speak to a lot of different people with a lot of different accents, so that helped me with that. But also in realizing I'm not lazy. I ended up, I think, summing this up to 18-hour shifts, because then first there was commuting, then there was, brainwashing that this is a great opportunity and we are all entrepreneurs. Then 12-hour shifts, then back to brainwashing, and then back to commuting. I'm kidding you not. I'm kidding you not.
I want to do an entire episode on MLMs, because I feel like that I was inducted into an MLM cult, and it was so traumatizing, and I feel like we are very susceptible to that kind of brainwashing.
We're so good at being cult members. Mm-hmm. I don't think cult leaders, because there's too much self-doubt, but I think we're amazing cult members. So, call me. No, my ex-husband, I think he was in a cult at some point, but not, I think he had some kind of addictive personality, because first he was in a cult, then something happened and he fell into a cult of, being an entrepreneur, being a millionaire, making money. And then we moved to Canada, then he got himself into some proper addictions. So, that was a roller coaster of its own. But yeah, I think I was craving structure and, firing me up with all those ideas and dreams of actually being an entrepreneur, making money is such a courageous way. It definitely resonated with me, but I was sometimes making no money for those 18-hour shifts, or like $17, or sometimes $300, which when you break it down, it's still nothing. This is nothing for 18 hours outside of your house. So yeah, what was the MLM you were in?
Young Living. It's essential oils, and it's like wrapped up in like the Utah Mormons. So it's got this whole religious side to it. It's such a disaster. Nice. Oh my God. I would love to like go off for hours about my experience with Young Living, because it was so awful, but I'm really aggressively anti-MLM as a result. And like, I see so many. That? How long ago? That was actually just in 2019, and it was sort of in the pandemic a little bit, and it was actually right around when I was diagnosed that I was getting out of it, and was part of the implosion, because all of my social life was wrapped up in these women who were in this essential oils business. And so when I left, like I was I was ghosted and totally like blacklisted. I had no friends all of a sudden, and I was like, oh my God, what has happened? Like all of these women co-opted this friendship, and it was, anyway. I don't even want to get it started, because I literally could go on and on. Stay tuned, because I feel like I know, right? Maybe I'll have you come back. But I was like, I would love, like, I don't know. I have very little tolerance for the defense of MLM. So. Oh yeah,
I have a radar right now. Jesus, when anybody is telling me remotely something that reminds me of that, I'm just. Going back into being very polite and just non-speaking, almost like,
yeah.
Okay, bye.
But you brought up something about realizing that idea of like that constantly feeling like we are lazy, even though there is overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And I think you really tapped into that idea of like, I know I'm smart, but I can't figure out why I am such a failure at life. Like, just feeling like we are failures at life, even though when you really step back at it, I think, and a diagnosis has helped me do this. Like when you step back and you look at the course of what you've actually accomplished, nobody in their right mind would ever call you lazy, except for maybe the people who are closest to you. who have the most damaging, right? Like your teachers and your parents and, or maybe your partners. But like, I think that was one of the things that really tipped off my own therapist was I was always complaining to her about what a lazy piece of shit I was. And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, she was like, how can you be lazy and also write a book? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I just did. I don't know. That was different, you know? And she was like, look at all these businesses you've started. And I was like, yeah, but they don't go anywhere. And I always had an excuse to combat the overwhelming evidence that I was not, in fact, lazy. And I was like, why was I so insistent? And I think so much of that comes down to, like you said, like that confusion around feeling smart and yet seeming like wherever you want to be, you cannot get there.
Yeah, because there has to be a reason. They're giving you the reason, but it's not the right one. Just there has to be a reason, and just why? Because you can. The thing is, you can see inside your head, and you can see that you can move those things around. You have so much mental capacity, and you know this is not a dumb person brain. And you can see yourself while hyper-focusing how much you can accomplish. So you have the evidence that you can accomplish things, but then, you know, the self-doubt or just, I don't know, life comes in and just steps on you. I don't know. And Jesus, that was just, those 18-hour shifts were just the first concrete thing I had against my grandma's voice in my head, because that was mostly my grandma that was very vocal about me being lazy. But, you know, that's a person who says, well, when I'm tired, I just start vacuuming. So my heart rate goes up and I'm not tired anymore.
It's that easy.
No, but like she wouldn't allow herself to be tired.
Yeah.
You know, so her voice is strongly in my head, was strongly in my head about me being lazy. But then I was like, that just doesn't compute, you know, working so hard and being lazy. And that was the first thing I could really catch and hold on to just see that I maybe not that I'm not lazy, but it can be just that. So that was like a hook for me. But I was like 21, I think, so, you know, still a decade before a diagnosis and some actual accomplishments, because I was not accomplishing much at that moment. You know, I was failing at marriage, failing at being a millionaire entrepreneur, self-made something, you know, so I did not have accomplishments, but I had at least some kind of real life experiences that were contradicting this laziness stamp on me.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to shift now to your podcast, because I just love this so much, because obviously, you know, I feel like we have very similar path in terms of wanting to talk about that, right? Like wanting to talk about this experience and wanting to talk about it through the lens of being a woman. And so you've started a podcast where you're interviewing Polish women about their ADHD and their ADHD diagnoses. And I mean, what would you, is there a different, like, do you find there is an overwhelming difference between how ADHD is viewed in Poland? I mean, are kids even diagnosed in childhood to the degree they are here? Like, what are some of the biggest differences you're seeing in terms of how ADHD is viewed as a Polish person?
So that's going to be a long-winded rant. Let me just start with that. America and American scientists in Poland are viewed in two ways. It's either American scientists proved that, and then, you know, some kind of truth that it's true for all eternity, or this new American thing. So basically, it's either a holy truth coming from, you know, the American scientists, that there is just an expression in Polish, the American scientists prove that, or this new American thing, because American is used as an adjective for something new, eccentric, kind of pretentious, maybe not very well thought out. So that's ADHD, basically.
Yeah.
It's viewed as something new, trend, something, but kind of dumb. Let's not pay attention to that. So we're not being diagnosed. Not the kids, to be honest, nobody. Like this new wave coming in, it's definitely thanks to a pandemic. I mean, like, this is obviously a global trauma, but thanks to a pandemic, I think there is a wave of, and to the internet, obviously, the TikToks that are, available, and the memes and everything, and the podcasts. This is a wave of diagnostics. But basically, also, I think the hierarchy of values are so different. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start my podcast, because I was listening to your podcast and relating hardly with so many things, but some things just did not click. For example, you were saying, like, oh, the ADHD is seen as, what was the expression? Not moral failing. We don't see it as that. Because I think what this is relating to is the American dream. I know you're Canadian, so I'm saying American meaning New World, right? So, the American dream is very open about pursuit of happiness. Money is the way to show that God likes you, and, it's a repayment for your hard work. And in Poland, I feel, and this is my opinion, I'm obviously not an anthropologist. This is, I know a bunch of stuff about a bunch of stuff, but not very much about one thing. So I'm just telling you from my ADHD brain how I see it from my experience. We are mistrustful towards rich people and money. This Catholic Protestant thing about money, because I think in Protestant culture, religion, money is just a way, a thing to be pursued, but as a means to show that God likes you, basically. And I think in Poland, the Polish version of Catholicism is like, we obviously want money, but we're kind of mistrustful towards people that actually succeeded. And also the word of success. I really like this thinking about languages and what they convey in values, because as I was thinking of success, this is not very native to me to think of success. In Polish there is word powodzenie, so basically I think that life in New World values is supposed to be successful. But in old world, in Poland, you are supposed to have prosperity. But prosperity is not a good word to say powodzenie, because powodzenie is just something that happens to you. And even the core of the word is about leading. You are being led to something. So happiness, success, prosperity, money, wealth is everything in powodzenie that it's external. It's a result of many factors. One of them, you being honorable, being dutiful, you being hardworking, of course, but also your family, your circumstances, and just general luck. So we are not that optimistic about our possibilities. I don't know if you know that, but not every child in Poland hears that they can be anything they want to. We don't hear that. We don't trust that. We don't believe that. We just think life is hard. That's it. No funny business at the end. But at the end it will be good. Just life is hard. I also was listening to podcasts from my other very much beloved podcaster and stand-upper, Whitney Cummings, and she invited two Ukrainian women that were explaining just Slavic mentality and the way of living, and it very much resonated with me, because I think that the pursuit of happiness in Poland is covert, or maybe just it's not supposed to be the goal. Like my grandma, I don't think she was telling me to just find something to do to be happy. She was telling me to do things because this is my duty. You know, have good grades, be hardworking and stuff like that. So happiness is kind of like byproduct. If you have it, good. If you don't, doesn't matter. So, you know, with my ADHD brain, I need things to be exciting, pleasant, interesting, and it's kind of looked at like a shortcut from the universal truth that life is hard. When I think of New World and, you know, this hierarchy of values, that I think Americans and just New World people are thinking of ADHD as a shortcut to success. And we think of it as a shortcut from the universal truth that life is hard. Mm-hmm. So we're ADHDers, I think, are seen as people that trying to avoid the harsh reality. And in America, I think they're viewed as people that are trying to get accommodations, but kind of, you know, a leg up. Yeah. That's the main difference, I think, that I feel when I'm listening to Polish podcasters, which are not many. I might say there is actually one that is just centering ADHD. There was one, and now there is three, and one of them is me. So you can imagine that the need to express things in your own set of values, in your own language, in your own reality is so important, because as well we don't have access to resources that are very current, because books are kind of behind. If you don't speak English and you don't have internet, and that's a lot of people in Poland, you have no language for this. That's what part of the reason why I started the podcast. The podcast is mostly, you know, for me. I want to meet fun people, have amazing conversations, and cry. That's my goal, right? But I know that people will resonate with this, and they are already resonating with this, because having things said in your language, it makes it so much more easy to accept this about yourself. And, you know, if this is heard from other people from other countries, the creators from other countries, it's more difficult to, you know, send a link to your grandma that doesn't speak English, right? But if you have a book in Polish, or, you know, an article, or just a podcast that, you know, takes an hour to listen to, and it's so much easier. But I am kidding you not. Right now in Poland, there are 3 podcasts about ADHD centered, and they're all led by women. And one of them is me, it's 2 months old, and another one is, I think, 1 month old. And the other one is very good. It has I think around 35 episodes about different topics, and just it's very systematic, very a good resource. But, you know, just one resource. Yeah. Just one. And incidentally, today I am publishing an interview with that first podcaster. And the topic of our conversation is jealousy and comparing yourself. Because I think, you know, comparing yourself when you are a woman with ADHD is so easy. And falling into a pit of jealousy, it's a slippery slope. So I felt jealousy towards her, because obviously it's not good to be a pioneer, because that means, you know, there are no resources, but you get to be number one. And I did not get that. So I opened those emotions, and I talked about them openly and freely, because I really, really, really believe in the healing power of vulnerability and openness. I'm opening it in a very safe way for me, in my podcast on my terms, but I'm talking about this because I hear people on our group, well, I read posts, well, I didn't succeed like, my mom wanted me to, or like my sister, or like my mom's friend's daughter. If we don't have somebody to be compared to, somebody will tell us, well, you're not like this or like that. So basically, to answer your question, I see a lot of differences, and mostly it's in values, and that's why I think it's very, very important for people in all countries, speaking all languages, to have resources in their languages. To answer your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's not just vulnerability. I think it's also curiosity. And that's one of the things I love about this, the art of conversation and just verbal processing, right? And why I feel like this, what I stumbled into by just wanting to have conversations with other women about their experiences has snowballed for me into just this incredible learning experience, because it's healing to share. It's healing to have somebody share with you, but also just the curiosity, the overwhelming curiosity about why, right? So you're saying like, I'm jealous about another podcaster. Isn't it fascinating that I'm experiencing that? What's behind that, right? That sort of scientific mentality of like, what is the root of these emotions? And I think that's something that is unique.
I don't know.
To
it's just bravado.
Well, but I had
emotional bravado.
One of the best advice I was ever given to me by somebody who was talking about, it was about content, like social media content. So she was talking about like followers and how we can get really obsessed with followers and likes and downloads or whatever metric we're using. And she said, we immediately compare ourselves to the people who are much more successful in any in the industry in which we're in, as a way to kind of focus our motivation, right? It makes sense that we want to kind of focus and grow and grow and grow because it's exciting and there's lots of dopamine. But she was like, it's really, it's a tremendously pompous to think you can be as good as somebody who has been doing this for years when you've just started. And I'm like, yeah, that's fascinating. Like, why are we so pompous? Where is that coming from? And I think there's, we are very stubborn about our intellect and our expectations of ourselves too. But I think it's also about the excitement of chasing the number, chasing the metrics and the downloads and the likes. And it's going to keep us interested to constantly grow. And if we're not growing, stagnation is failure as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, and that is also, I think, the talking about the American kind of drive and the Protestant work ethic, and it's something I feel like I talk about a lot on the podcast, right? Which is this idea that like asking for help in this culture is failure, right? And we have to figure out how to do it ourselves. We have to figure out how to manage alone. Anything else, like the idea of community and community support, feels like failure. And I think that has a lot to do with that sort of drive of the frontier mentality or whatever it is, that idea of capitalism, and that if you work hard enough, you will be rewarded and all of that. Like it's all intertwined. But I think even when you were talking about the difference in terms of like the definition of prosperity and the definition of success from one culture to the other, it still feels like ADHD is viewed as an excuse, right? That it's being viewed as trying to get away with something, no matter what. And that's where I think, where that negative self-concept comes from, which is just like, am I making an excuse? I feel like I am. Like, I feel like I'm constantly questioning what is happening here, and what is this even ADHD, or is this just an excuse? Like, I think even though there might be a tendency to dismiss it as because it's popular and everybody's getting diagnosed right now, so therefore it must be ingenuine, or something else is happening. And it's still like, I feel like I have that tendency all the time. I'm constantly questioning, what is this? Why are we all getting diagnosed with this? It's got to be something else. Maybe we are just lazy or traumatized, or, like, I'm always like thinking about the fact that I'm just an angry woman who is, refusing to just get up and vacuum. But if I did just get up and vacuum, it would be good for my heart rate and, all those things. Like, if I could just be satisfied, everything would be wonderful. So anyway, those are my thoughts that I was thinking as you were talking, which is so fascinating. But it reminded me of that idea of like, why, having the curiosity and the wanting to know the why behind all of these behaviors, in terms of like, even, what roots us in terms of what we chase after in terms of success. And like, when you're talking about working 18-hour days and having to be in sales, which is my idea of hell, and all of that, like, what was the motivate? There had to have been some sort of motivation there that was keeping you from doing that, or keeping you in that work ethic, you know what I mean? And like, how do we tap into the why in terms of when we are motivated and when we aren't? I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. I feel
brainwashing helps tremendously. So, know.
Well, and they're keeping that carrot in front of your head with that MLMs do, right? Which is the idea that, you just have to keep working and eventually you will be rewarded, and you won't. You never get rewarded in a pyramid scheme. Newsflash, only the person at the top gets rewarded. They are co-opting you. All right. Anyway, enough. I get so enraged. All right. Okay. So I want to be mindful of the time because I do feel like I could listen to you forever. Oh, you're so articulate. And I mean, I think about the email you first sent me when you were talking about the story. You said the stories are like hands that reach back in my past to soothe and shelter my younger self. It's almost as compassion was a quantum force that can travel back in time. I mean, oh my goodness. It's so emotional and poetic to think about the healing and the sharing. So I guess I guess let's cry. I don't know.
No, can we have a crying break? I'm crying. No, I think that, late diagnosis makes sense. Like, sometimes you think like, well, I'm this old. Why does it make sense? But, I'm just hearing that, people learning about different disorders. Like, yesterday I was listening to a narcissist, diagnosed narcissist that is trying to, be better. And he was saying that, he's spreading awareness about narcissism, and even people sometimes are reaching out to him and they're saying their 70-year-old woman says that now she gets closure from her husband that is dead for 10 years. So, is her whole life meaningless because she couldn't, be strong, leave him, something? Like, if she reaches closure at 60 or 70, does it mean her whole life means nothing? Well, no. So this closure and, this quantum force of self-forgiveness, it works both ways. Like, it works in the future and it works in the past. So that's another reason to get diagnosed, even if you're 90, 100. Absolutely.
And just keep questioning, I think, and having these conversations. I think being kinder to ourselves is also incredibly tremendous and healing, and realizing that, we're not alone, and that there are many of us who are going through this and experiencing this, regardless of where we grew up. I think is incredibly healing. Pina, ADHD Alien, has done so much for the community. Oh my goodness. So shout out to her. But I also know that, I know that she also really, really struggles with imposter syndrome and feeling very lonely. We all are just searching for the answers. I think it's something that we have in common. So I want to ask you before we talk about the podcast and where people can find you and the podcast, would you rename ADHD to something else?
No, I would keep ADD, but I would just make it different words under the letters. So I would say it's arrhythmic dopamine distribution.
How I really like that. I don't know if anybody's used the D for dopamine before. I mean, we've definitely talked about dopamine. I really like that, and I really like keeping ADD too. It's just very efficient.
Yeah, because then you're kind of using the thing that already exists, but reclaiming it.
Right.
So, and I was thinking maybe anormal or abnormal dopamine distribution, but arrhythmic feels better to me because it's less pathologizing.
Yeah.
And still accurate.
Yeah,
and you can still call it, ADD, like if you need a disorder, like, cool. So it's like an ADD plus.
The extra D is extra disordered.
Yeah. So let's do that.
So I want people to at least anyone who can. I wish I could listen to your podcast. So maybe I'll try to download.
How do you do transcripts?
I mean, I tried to. Well, I was reading some of the comments on your Facebook page through Google Translate, and it was hilarious because I was like, I mean, that's an AI that still needs a lot of work, but I was trying to follow the thread.
Do you have any Polish friends?
No. I mean, maybe. Actually, I got to think about it. I don't have a lot of friends anymore. So, but I got to think. I have you.
You're not a millennial anymore. Think maybe there's something in your area. Like, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of if I can download it and do a translate transcript. But for anybody who does, who can listen to your podcast, where can they find you and where are you online?
I'm on Spotify, and I will just spell it out because I believe that there are Polish women listening to you with such a big Polish community in Canada and in the USA. So it's Kobiety ADHD, and it's spelled Kobiety ADHD. So that translates to women and ADHD. So I'm, ripping your idea off, and I'm very happy that you're fine with this. I asked you, but after I already started it, so it's like half cool, I guess.
Well, I will say, I've often said on the podcast, the whole reason I called this Women in ADHD, because literally that's what I typed in the search bar when I was diagnosed, and it just felt like that's what it should be called. So I take no ownership over the brilliance of the name. So it's very functional and efficient. So absolutely. And
I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. Is like I don't know, a bastard child of mine. I'm not really taking care of YouTube. I just started Instagram, but like I'm a boomer from Boomerland, and I just I see no future there. Again, there is a future, I guess. My publicist says I should be doing this. I have a publicist, by the way.
That's impressive.
That is impressive. We're both unpaid. Isn't that impressive?
I always laugh when people email me and they talk about the team. They're like, "Dear Team Katie." I'm like, "There's no team. There's just me." Although I did hire an editor, which was the best money I've ever spent. I finally offloaded my editing to the wonderful Emily.
Amazing.
But that's like, other than that, there's no team. But
well, I do have a team, so I'm very proud of myself for knowing my mistakes and knowing that most of them is just not hiring a team. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram for some kind of reason. I'm not on TikTok, and that's a frontier I'm going to die on. I am on Spotify. You can listen to me on Spotify and on YouTube. And please send me feedback, because guys, like, dopamine is... I need my dopamine hits. Like, talking to those people is amazing, but then editing, I need some kind of reward. Please message me.
I hear you. I know. I was always I was very much reliant on feedback. I mean, I still am. I still love it, but yeah, it's intense to keep doing this work. But I feel like the conversations alone are what, like, having this kind of conversation to me is so stimulating and so interesting. I mean, how did this become my life, that I get to have conversations with women like you randomly, and that was the whole reason I started the podcast, was so I had an excuse to talk to women like you who are just brilliant and fascinating and progressing the conversation around what even are we talking about. So I'm so grateful that, that's what keeps me going,
Same.
honestly. Everything else is just sort of this like busy work to get it out there so other people can hear these conversations. But I hear you. It is a hard, lonely slog sometimes. Doing all of the behind the work. So
I'm happy somebody knows.
Well, I am just so thrilled that you reached out to me. Thank you so much, and I love what you obviously love that you're advancing this conversation and serving women in your community, and also serving yourself and your own personal journey. And so, just you're awesome. Thank you, Paulina.
So much for answering my email. I was so starstruck that I had to take my meds to just, avoid paralysis, because I was so happy. I knew I will just not answer to your email for a week if I don't take my meds immediately and answer immediately. So thank you for responding. Thank you for having me. This is absolutely a dream come true. And, my dreams of being famous are finally being realized.